£49,000, 441 pence in tuition fees and accommodation over 3 years and still no degree to show for it. That's the reality for thousands of students, thanks to a marking boycott by the Lecturers' Union, the University and Colleges Union.
Well, students are urging their universities to get back around the table with the union to settle their long-running disputes over pay and conditions.
One of those students is Charlie Gaisford, who, as it happens, is the son of our chief correspondent, Richard Gaisford. More importantly, he's a third-year student of politics at Bristol University, but says if he graduates this August, it will be without a classification for his degree, not a first 2-1, just a degree, because his papers won't be marked. And he joins us now, along with Professor Kehinde Andrews, who's a lecturer at Birmingham City University, also a UCU member. We'll start with you, Charlie. It must be frustrating after 3 years to be at this point, just about to finish your finals. Are they done yet? And you don't know if they're going to be marked.
Yeah, that's right. So everything's handed in. Everything's meant to be marked. But the current UCU boycott means that nothing is going to get marked until October.
Do you know that is the case?
That, as everything stands, if the UCU cannot reach an agreement with the UCEA, who make the payments for the lecturers, then nothing is going to be marked till October, or unless the UCU call off the boycott.
Not all lecturers are UCU members, and so there will be some marking happening.
That's right, and that's why it seems so unfair, because there's some students, for example, some of my friends who do economics, who will have all their papers marked because their lecturers don't strike, but in other subjects, for example, geography, history, politics, particularly the humanities subjects, the lecturers are much more susceptible to striking. And that makes it such an uneven playing field. For example, when we're going to look for jobs in September, those students doing those degrees where they're not marking, where they are marking, have much better prospects of getting those jobs than I do.
So do you think because employers are going to say, well, hold on, what did you get for your degree? Or for those people who are maybe going on to do further studying, further education, they'll want to know what grade they got and you won't be able to tell them?
Well, yeah, that's right, Charlotte. I'm thinking about, I'm confident that my work that I put in this year, which I've worked really, really hard for, is enough. But my word is not enough for the employers who are looking at me and saying, well, how do we know that you didn't fail your degree?
I know that you're going to be speaking to, you've set up a campaign, haven't you? Students have been signing open letters to try to get this situation changed, and you're going to be meeting with the Vice-Chancellor later to discuss this. So are you hopeful that you can get this resolved?
It's a really, really complex situation, given the amount of universities involved in the dispute. So the UCU represents 145 universities, 145 lecturers at universities, and it is important that every single university vice-chancellor comes back to the table and says that we are willing to renegotiate with the UCU. And without that, so they've done that at Cambridge, and that's what I'm hoping that my Vice-Chancellor will be saying to me later today as well. OK,
well, let's pick up with Kehinde on this, just to get sort of more of the background on it. Because Kehinde, you're a member of the union, but you're not involved in the boycott, are you? I mean, it seems difficult for the situation that students have been left with, that they have to face the consequences of this.
Unfortunately, as staff and as people who teach students, it's the last thing we want to do. And actually, if you think about what's happened over the past year, there's been large-scale industrial action of strikes in term time. There's been action short of strike, where we stayed at work but kept working to hours. And this is really the last stage, the last thing we can do, because the universities haven't been listening. And I think you have to say, what makes the university run? It is the quality of the academic staff. And this marking boycott, which is part of a much bigger dispute, is about pay, which has dropped by almost 25% since 2009. It is about working conditions, where we're overworked and stressed. It is about the fact that about a third of my colleagues are on temporary fixed-term contracts. The conditions that we're working in, frankly, are not tenable, and the pay just is not good enough. And so something has to change, and unfortunately, this means that the students are the ones who lose out.
Professor Andrews, let me just ask you, because, you are a professional, a lecturer, your colleagues are. And being a professional means, there's some obligations on you. And it may well be that you have a just cause, that the pay's not fair and you're choosing to go on strike. There's lots of different ways in which you can take industrial action. You can miss some lectures, you can not do tutorials. But don't you think that there's something about the final exams after the end of a degree for students who've done nothing wrong? They're not part of this dispute. They've gone through a whole pandemic, they've worked hard for 3 years. At the end of their time, you're then not going to mark their dissertations and papers. I mean, aren't there some things which should be sacrosanct? If you're a nurse and you go on strike, you don't say, as a nurse, I'm not going to attend accident and emergency when people are dying, because there's certain things which professionally you've got to do. And surely professionally, even if you're right to strike, you should mark the essays and the dissertations.
Well, I think it's a bit dramatic to compare A&E to marking essays and exams.
Really?
I also would stress, as I said before, this is not the first. This is not the first part of a piece of industrial action. There has been a series of industrial action over a year. There has been action short of strike, and this is the last. This is the last thing, really. This is the last thing we can do. And I would stress this is about the employers having listened to their employees, and as part being a professional and modelling proper work for students, is to say, well, look, if your conditions are untenable, then you have to withdraw. You're perfectly right to go on strike and to withdraw your labour. How could I teach my students about being in the workplace, and teach them to be workers in the future, and not say you have the right to take industrial action?
But Professor Andrews, I'm not disputing your right to withdraw your labour. And I'm not saying that your cause is not just. I'm just saying that as a professional, when there are so many ways in which you can take action, to not mark final students' exams and dissertations, I do think as a professional that's equivalent in a life-saving profession to not being there when somebody's life is at risk. You're talking about students' whole careers and their whole 3-year academic period. You're not going to mark their dissertations. It just seems to me like
I think
something which is wrong, actually.
The question should be, why have the universities allowed it to come to this point? When we go on strike, we lose hundreds of thousands of pounds. It's not something we just do lightly. As I said, we're all dedicated to the students. It's not action we want to take. The question is, why have the university employers allowed it to get to this point? Because we have been willing to negotiate for a whole year, for more 2 years on some of these issues. So it's not right or fair to push it back onto us and say, well, you're bad for withdrawing your labour. No, the universities are bad.
But why is it right or fair?
Millions of money, billions of pounds. No, because it matters, right?
Why is it right or fair to put it onto the students?
I've been in this profession for the last. I've been in this profession for the last, since you started this off with £50,000 in fees, all this money. Unfortunately, universities become a business. And the people in that business who've been most squeezed have been the members of staff who have had untenable conditions. I'm someone who's been very successful, a professor in this profession. And I would tell you now, I probably wouldn't do it again, given all of the excess hours, given all of the harassment and bullying, given the low pay, given the pensions. This is a profession where people are leaving and don't want to be in. That is for the future students to say, well, actually, if you don't look after your staff, there won't be a HE sector. And this will be a completely different discussion. So it will be completely wrong for us not to take industrial action. And the question is, why are universities spending millions on buildings and facilities and not supporting the people who actually make the universities run?
OK, well, let's pick up with Charlie there. Obviously, Kahinde's making the point is looking to the future and supporting those staff. But I guess for you, your year as well has already been through so much, hasn't it? With COVID, with the level of debt that you will have got into anyway, that's probably not much consolation, is it?
Well, absolutely not. I'm staring down the barrel at about £45,000 worth of debt and absolutely no degree to show for it. And I have sympathy. I do have sympathy with the lecturers. But Joe Grady, the leader of the UCU, came out the other day and said that this was the benefit of all. This was the benefit of students as well. And I wish Joe was here so I could ask her why. Why is that? How does this benefit me? Because really, the only benefit that I can see is that I really hope they get a fairer pay deal because they deserve it. But in reality, students are being used as pawns in this game, and it's completely unfair because it's not my battle, but it's become completely my problem. And
when Professor Andrews says it's the last resort, they've tried everything else, sorry, but we're not going to mark your final essays and dissertations, does that feel justified?
I think it feels completely unjustified, and I think, in my opinion, there would have been better ways to deal with this, which could have left the students out of this very, very messy debate.
OK. Charlie, Kahinde, thank you both very much for joining us
Andrews.
This morning.
Appreciate it.
Now, 7:31.
I should declare interest. My son's also doing his final exams.
And has been marked?
I kind of know.
Has he got marking issues?
I hope not.
Hope not. Fingers crossed. All right, then.